Podcast. We're back after the bye week, and it is time to get into this week's Buffalo Bills opponent, the Carolina Panthers, who I feel like a lot of people probably, when you got the schedule back in May, probably like skipped right over this one because the Panthers have been this team that have been kind of trying to figure things out. But here we are, 6-7 weeks into the season, and the Carolina Panthers riding a 3-game winning streak, and a fun one to get into. A lot of fun storylines around this team. And I'm going to Carolina. The Observer, Alex Zietlow, covers the Panthers, kind enough to join us today. Alex, how are you?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, no, I appreciate you taking some time. And like I mentioned at the top here, this is a team that it's frisky. It's a frisky team on both sides of the ball. I mean, that Jets game was about as crappy a game as there was to watch. But if you go back and watch this team the last couple of weeks, especially on the offensive side, and we're going to get into that in a minute, it's been a team that is, kind of started to figure some things out under Dave Canales. What's gone so right for the Panthers, especially over the last couple of weeks?
It's really quite simple. And I know football is such a complicated game, so I really hate reducing it to certain things. But the story kind of tells itself. They've stopped the run, and they've run the ball really effectively. And that is a sustainable way to win games. Just to break those 2 points down a little bit. Firstly, they're running the ball like crazy. It really started in the Miami Dolphins game when the emergence of Rico Dowdle happened. He ran for 206 yards. Also was a factor in the receiving game. And Rico kind of was brought in as the backup running back this year. He had an 1,000-yard year with the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys decided not to re-sign him. They let him go in free agency. The Panthers take him in free agency. But he was supposed to be this reserve option for Chubba Hubbard, who is the running back number 1, who the Panthers just had extended Chubba to a 4-year contract the year before because Chubba himself had a 1,000-yard year. So, okay, you have this backfield with 2,000-yard rushers. What are you going to do with it? Well, they kind of couldn't figure it out at the beginning how to do this carry distribution between these really prolific backs. What happens? Chubba Hubbard goes out with a calf injury on Rico Dowdle's first game as the starter, as the unquestioned number 1 guy. He runs for over 200 yards and does a really good job. The offensive line dominates the Dolphins' defensive line. And you're just like, okay, well, in retrospect, that's the Dolphins. They already weren't really a great run defense team. What's going to happen the next week when the Panthers play a pretty legitimate team in the Cowboys? Well, Rico Dowdle does even more, and he gets even more yards from scrimmage, 239 or something like that. That is 183 rushing yards, and I can't do the math off the top of my head, but he has a whole bunch of receiving yards and a touchdown. So he has another great game. And then obviously Chubba and Rico really kind of lay the groundwork and kind of cement the game against the Jets. The Panthers didn't have a great offensive game. They only scored 13 points, but that was enough to get across the winless Jets. So now, okay, that's the run game. The Panthers also were not supposed to have a good run defense this year, and all of a sudden they have a really good run defense this year. One stat that pops up, because I know I'm kind of rambling in this, but one stat that pops up, they have not allowed more than 10 yards in a single rush for the past 3 games. So that means that no running back, no quarterback scramble has yielded over 10 yards against this Panthers defense the past 3 games. That's remarkable. And that's something that, like, if you asked the Panthers defense to do this last year, that's like wishing upon a star. And that's not what's going on this year. So I hate to be so reductive about it because Bryce Young is also playing turnover-free football. The passing game is coming. The play calling in marrying with Bryce Young's game is actually kind of transforming this offense as well. The J.C. Horn just had 2 picks against the Jets. So this past defense is playing well as well. But if you're asking me what has gone right the past 3 weeks, that's it. They're running the ball well, and they're stopping the run as well.
Some really great insight. And I think it's so interesting to start here because if you think about what's kind of led to this 2-game losing streak for the Bills is they've gotten away from the dominant run game that they had established over the first 4 games, and James Cook, the AFC Offensive Player of the Month for the first 4 weeks. And since then, it's been a struggle to get him going. I mean, he ran for 87 on 17 carries against the Falcons, but it hasn't been that same kind of dominance on the ground. And then you turn it over to the defensive side of the ball for the Bills, and I see Rico Dowdle and what he's done the last couple of weeks, and you take the worst rush DVOA defense in the Bills by a wide margin. I mean, this is a team that has been the worst run defending team in the league. Now, they're going to get some guys back this week. This is going to look like a little bit of a different defense. You know, Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt were the two premier free agent additions for this Bills team. They've been out for the first 6 games. Where are they going to be at when they step out on the field on the road against Carolina? Are they going to be ready to contribute at the level that the Bills really do need them to contribute? The Bills have their own rookie kind of sensation in Deion Walker. He's been really good against the run. He's been one of the only defenders that has been good against the run. So that's going to be such a fun matchup to watch. Dowdle and Hubbard versus this Bills run defense that struggled, although it's going to look a little bit different. The question I have for you, though, is it did look a little bit different last week against the Jets. Now, the Jets defensively are much better against the run, but it felt like having to inject Chubba Hubbard, their top back going into the season, back into the mix, it made things a little bit wonky, which I wonder, is it one of those situations that somebody that's so close to the team and watches this, where if you're Canales, you just say, let's ride this Rico Dowdle hot hand and have Chubba maybe out there, you know, one of every 3 times that you're going to give the ball to Dowdle? Or is it something that you think you keep spamming this whole look and trying to fit these two pieces together because they're so important to what they do offensively?
It's such a great question, Matt. You are getting at literally the heart of the most confounding question that's in Bank of America Stadium right now: what to do with Chubba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle. The company line is that it's a, quote, good problem to have, and you really can't push back against that too hard, because yes, when the running back position is a very violent position, they've already struggled with injuries at that point. Or at that position. So like having 2 really prolific backs is important, but they got to learn how to work together, or maybe not even learn. This coaching staff has to figure out ways to put them in the best positions possible. Just to put some numbers to it, Chubba had 14 carries for 31 yards and did so on 38 snaps. So he played about 53% of offensive snaps. And then Rico had 17 carries for 79 yards, but only played about 46% of offensive snaps. And that's just how it kind of shook out. They split series. So Rico ended up having some of the later game series where they were really trying to ice the game. And so that's why his carries total is a little bit more than Chubba's. But like, there's no doubt that both of these backs get better as the games go on. There's no doubt that like their strengths are setting up runs in the beginning of the game and then figuring out what the defense is doing and being like, okay, I'm going to adjust to this in the second half. Chubba is a guy who seems to get better as he gets hit more. He's not going to be someone who breaks away for like a 60-yard touchdown, but he will like his superpower is never losing yards. Rico is more of a break free guy. Like they have similar tendencies, but they're also very different in some ways. It's just I'm glad I don't have to make the decision about what to do over there because I truly don't know. The real thing is like, if the Panthers don't play well in the run game against the Bills, as you've articulately mentioned, they're not the best run defense. Like, I think something has to change because it didn't go very well against the Jets, but they still came out with a victory because the Jets couldn't do anything on offense. Something would need to change. I apologize for not really having a great answer, but in fairness, like the guys getting paid millions of dollars also don't have great answers at this moment. So it'll be an interesting test for sure.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how this plays out. And, the Bills are in a really interesting spot. I mean, locally, the panic button has been pushed by a very large chunk of the fan base after a 2-game losing streak, Super Bowl dreams, aspirations. I mean, this has been like a 3-4 year process where, getting over that hump has been a constant conversation point, and you come out, you dominate early in the season, and then kind of the wheels fall off. Typically the Bills play extremely well off the bye under Sean McDermott, and figuring out a way to answer some of the questions that have popped up over the last couple of weeks. They're going to get a true test on the road against the Panthers team that does really good things on both sides of the ball. All right, I want to talk to you about the quarterbacks here in a second. Before we get there, Shout is brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. And right now it's the rush to the Tops Red Zone. You can win the GOAT, the greatest of all tailgates, right now in the Tops Red Zone raffle. Shop your favorite brands like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and you'll be entered to win the GOAT, an ultimate tailgate package that includes a Samsung outdoor TV, Traeger grill, Oni pizza oven, Igloo, Cool Tunes cooler, a $500 chef experience, and so much more. Find out more by going to topsmarkets.com/redzone. All right, bummer. You mentioned Bryce Young playing turnover-free football. Not going to play this weekend. It's going to be the Andy Dalton show. And, this is a fan base in Buffalo that's very familiar with Andy Dalton, going back to when the Bills broke the playoff drought. It was Dalton who was leading the charge for the Bengals over the Ravens to get the Bills into the playoffs. So a very much beloved figure in Buffalo, but that'll be on hold this week. What changes going from, you've had a couple years now to look at Dalton with a couple of spot starts over the years. What changes for this Panthers offense with Andy Dalton at the helm?
So, Matt, just real quick at the top, the official company line is that Bryce Young is, quote, day-to-day, and that he just has an ankle injury, and that it is still possible for him to play on Sunday. If the national reports are at all true that he has a high ankle sprain or even a low ankle sprain, this is just Alex Zietlow speaking, it would be very difficult for him to find a way onto the field. I think the general sentiment in Carolina is that Andy Dalton will get the start, but just so we have that base covered, there is still a possibility, at least, that Bryce Young plays. But to get to your question, how does the offense look different with Andy Dalton at the helm? You're going to lose a little bit of rushing ability. Bryce Young is actually kind of an underrated runner. He's pretty good. Or his whole thing is being creative in the backfield and dodging and sidestepping pass rushers. And that's really important. That's kind of his thing. That's when he's at his best, is when he's able to be this version of Alabama Bryce that, just dazzles and does things that you can't really imagine. I will say that the Panthers are at their best when they're just handing the ball off and they're letting this offensive line, as injured as they are, to do its work and to maul and to let the running backs run in behind them. So I think that's going to be what this offense looks like a lot this week. Now, Andy does have a bit more of a willingness to let the ball air out. I think his average depth of target, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think his average depth of target is much higher than Bryce's on this season and just in general as well. You saw that last year. The moment Andy Dalton came into the game after Bryce Young was benched, he was just chucking it all over the field. So there have been some calls in Charlotte this year of being like, well, Dave Canales isn't the most aggressive play caller. That's kind of been changed a little bit because Bryce is furnishing a little bit more explosiveness this year, but you could really see it last year. No, it's not Dave. It was the quarterback not taking those deep routes and not extending the field just generally. And Andy's willing to do that. He has this kind of gunslinger approach to things. So I think the deep threat is going to look they're going to go to that a little bit more, but I think they're still going to run the ball a lot. One other thing that's important, Andy Dalton loves Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette, the 2024 first-round pick from the Panthers, or for the Panthers, hasn't had the greatest start to his 2025 season, his sophomore season. But when Andy's in the game, he gets targeted a lot. Andy threw the ball 7 times against the Jets after Bryce Young went out with an ankle injury. Of those 7 times, 5 of them were to Legette, including a 33-yard toss that on a 3rd and 8 that essentially sealed the game. So I think if Andy's behind center, you're going to see Xavier Legette be more of a factor in this offense. Obviously, T-Mac is an important part, and T-Mac and Bryce have really good chemistry. But these are just stuff off the top of my head. The system doesn't necessarily change when the 2 quarterbacks are back there. Just really like how the system is used. Okay, Andy's going to throw the ball a little bit more. But, hey, if the Panthers have any chance of winning this game, which you're making it seem like the Buffalo Bills are struggling and the Panthers are super hot. Well, the Buffalo Bills still have a better record. And I know that Buffalo's smashed the panic button. Well, and the Panthers are celebrating, and the Bills have a similar record, which is kind of funny. But all that said, if the Panthers have a chance to win this game, they got to get the run game going. And, that would be required if Bryce Young or if Andy Dalton was back there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many guys get back. I mean, Matt Milano, he's kind of been in and out of the lineup, dealing with a pec injury. The back seven, particularly the safeties at the back end have drawn the ire of Bills Mafia. I mean, it's been, there's been some really just poor play from Taylor Rapp, who's been a really solid player for them since coming over from the LA Rams. And then it was Cole Bishop, the second round pick last year, that just hasn't really ever settled in comfortably to a role. And he missed a lot of training camp, first preseason game. They talk about a lot about that as well. But that's an area where, if you miss an angle or two, this is a safety duo that combined has missed 14 tackles in 6 weeks. And that to me is a recipe for disaster against a guy like Dowdle, who's already getting pretty much untouched to the second level. And if you're not taking him down at the second level, it's going to turn into all types of problems. So I send you a bunch of questions, and I think one of them I might have framed improperly because I've only watched a handful of Panthers games live. And I think the handful of times I've watched, Leggett was getting the ball thrown to him. So the idea, and this was a very limited sample size, so I just must have tuned in for the one or two targets that he's getting a game looking back. But what has been the impact of Tet McMillan, a guy who's a bona fide number one, on a guy in Leggett who, correct me if I'm wrong, it was a little bit of a disappointing year one last year, even though he was maybe used a little bit more. Where did you land on Leggett after year one, and where do things stand now, 7 weeks into the second season?
I would say that Leggett actually had a bit of an underrated rookie year. I know nationally his perception was, whoa, the Panthers traded up into the first round for this guy who barely crested 500 yards receiving and only had 4 touchdowns or whatever. But I think when he was in the game, he was a legitimate playmaker. And when he was schemed open, he could really finish plays. Yes, he dropped that. He had a terrible drop against the Philadelphia Eagles last year, which has kind of become the indelible moment of his career today, which is just really rough because, he should have caught that pass. If you guys don't remember what I'm talking about, the Panthers were literally one pretty easy catch away from beating the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles last year, which is kind of nuts to think about because the Panthers were not good last year and the Eagles were remarkable. And so he dropped that and that became a whole thing and whatever. But I think the second year, everyone was expecting this massive jump after this kind of underrated I wouldn't go as far as say disappointing, but underrated first year. And then it just didn't happen. He was dropping balls. He couldn't get 2 feet in bounds on a pretty routine catch week one. That would have been one of the more explosive plays of the day. It's not an issue of effort because he's a really good run blocker as his size might indicate. But it was a question of finishing plays. It was a question of having awareness on where he's at on the field. And so and then while he's at his lowest and while the fan base was kind of like questioning who Leggett was, he gets this hamstring injury and he's out for 2 weeks. And then when he's out for 2 weeks, this guy, Teteroa McMillan, just absolutely shines. He ends up just like getting all of these targets down the field. He ends up being kind of the only bright spot early on for this Panthers passing offense. And so I think your question of has T-Mac taken pressure off of Xavier, I think it's a fair one. I think they could actually be really good filling separate roles though, because I think T-Mac is a natural X receiver, natural number one go-to guy, whereas Xavier is also good on the outside, but he is much more of someone who is, good. He won't be like he's not like a great 50-50 ball guy, but he is really fast. He's just got like straight ahead speed where he should be able to be a decent deep threat. when he has gotten the ball in space, he can really do something with it. So I don't know. I think they can complement each other quite well. Still, Xavier has struggled to this point, so it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of continues to build. But I think both of them, T-Mac or Teterow McMillan and Xavier Legette, can work well together in this offense, and that's kind of what Dave Canales is betting on. He even when Xavier hasn't played well, he's still like, hey man, still got to be ready because we're going to get you the ball.
Great stuff. I'm going to send you out of here on one last question. If you take this Carolina Panthers defense right now and you are power ranking them in terms of like level of importance to the defense and, the impact that they've made through to this point in the year, what would be your 1, 2, 3 in terms of guys that have made an impact and need to make an impact against Josh Allen and this Bills offense this week?
Firstly, great question. I haven't really heard of this before, but I think it's a really smart question. Number 1 is Derek Brown. He is the defensive lineman, was a Pro Bowler in 2023, the team's only Pro Bowler, got hurt in the first game of last year and missed all of last year. And that's part of the reason why the Panthers were so bad against the run last year. And now he's looking like his 2023 self and perhaps even better. So Derek Brown is number 1, unquestioned. Number 2 is cornerback J.C. Horn. He was the sole Pro Bowler for the Panthers last year in 2024. He's coming off a 2-interception game against the Jets. The Panthers play a lot of zone defense, but J.C. still finds a way to make an impact. And when he's matched up with the other team's best receiver, it normally doesn't go very well for the other team's best receiver. However, against Josh Allen, against these Bills who have so much talent, that might not even be an issue. And then thirdly, the third guy is an interesting point because those are the 2 unquestioned leaders on this defense. I would say this safety named Trayvon Merrick. He is he's known to be this really hard hitter, pretty good in the run game. He lines up all over the field. He doesn't just line up in 2 high sets. He's also sometimes an outside linebacker in this 3-4 scheme where he sometimes rushes the passer. He was kind of played a QB spy role a little bit against Justin Fields and the Jets. He isn't known to be the best pass defender, like best defender in coverage, but in the run game, he's really bolstered this run game as well. So just to recap, 1, defensive lineman Derek Brown, 2, cornerback J.C. Horn, 3, safety Trayvon Merrick.
Amazing stuff, my man. Thank you so much for taking all this time for us on this Tuesday. This will air on Wednesday. Let everybody know where they can find your coverage this week as Bills fans get ready for the Panthers.
Well, I hope I didn't ramble too long. I promise you I'm more concise in my writing. But yes, Alex Zietlow of the Charlotte Observer. You can catch me on X at Alex Zietlow 05. That's AlexZietlow 05. And yeah, I tried to do a TikTok for a little bit, and that's just too hard to sustain. I don't know if you also have a TikTok, man. That place is just unrelenting. So I have kind of fallen off on that. But Matt, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and I hope to link up with you this weekend.
Sounds good, man.